Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room buzzed with voices, the sharp scrape of chairs against metal flooring and the low hum of the projector that flickered maps onto the wall. Men leaned in, voices overlapping, arguments sharpening like knives over strategy. But her voice barely made it past her lips. She spoke once. Then again. Quiet, precise, words trimmed down to their bones. But the sentences dissolved into the noise. No one turned. No one caught the warning in her eyes. She stopped talking, sat back, and in that silence, where her thoughts were louder than the room itself, she wondered, was she invisible or were they just choosing not to see her? It wasn't the first time. Her fingers curled around the pen in her hand, pressing so tightly the plastic bent. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air, heavy and sour. She focused on it, anchoring herself. She told herself to breathe, to stay still, to wait for her chance. But beneath her calm expression something twisted, a knot of unease. Not about them, not about the disrespect, she'd grown used to that. It was about the mission. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her bones. And yet, they didn't want to hear it. The colonel's voice cut through the room. "We move at dawn." He tapped the map with his pen, circles marking coordinates, arrows cutting through valleys and ridges. He didn't look at her once. No one did. She wrote nothing down. She didn't need to. The images burned into her mind. The plan was flawed. They were missing something, and she knew it would cost them. Maybe all of them. But she said nothing. Not again. Because every word she didn't say was a clue. And someday, they would understand why she stayed silent. The night before the mission stretched like a shadow. The base settled into uneasy quiet, boots scuffing against gravel outside, distant engines humming, the muted laughter of soldiers trying to push away fear with forced jokes. She sat on the edge of her bunk, polishing the scope of her rifle with slow, deliberate motions. The cloth caught the faint glow of the overhead bulb, her reflection fractured in the glass. Her hands were steady, but inside she was unraveling. A photograph lay face down on the blanket beside her. She refused to look at it tonight, not before this mission. She knew what it would do to her chest, how it would make her ache in ways she couldn't afford right now. But the edges of it pressed into her thigh like a reminder, a promise, a weight she carried into every battle. She thought of what she had tried to say in the briefing, how her words had slipped past their ears like wind through an open window. She could still hear herself. The valley floor is too exposed. The ridge isn't empty. She saw the way they avoided her gaze, the way the colonel's jaw tightened, dismissive. Noted, he had said, already moving on. Noted. A word that meant forgotten. She pulled her jacket tighter around her. The fabric smelled faintly of oil and dust. Her breath came shallow, then steady again. She forced her mind into rhythm, check, clean, assemble, load. The ritual saved her. It was the only time she didn't feel ignored. In the silence between mechanical clicks, her presence was undeniable. She existed here. Her work was proof. Outside her door, a voice broke through the corridor. Male, younger, "You ready?" She hesitated before answering. "Always." He stepped into the light. Private first-class Diaz. Barely 20, skin pale with nerves he tried to hide beneath a crooked smile. He held his helmet under one arm, the other hand scratching at the back of his neck. "They're saying it'll be quick. In and out. No surprises." She looked at him. His words were a shield he built for himself, but his eyes betrayed him. Wide, restless, afraid, she thought about saying what she knew, that there would be surprises, that nothing about tomorrow would be quick. But what good would it do? Would he believe her? Or would he smile that same nervous smile, pretend she hadn't spoken, and walk away still afraid? So she gave him mercy instead of truth. "Get some sleep," she said softly. "You'll need it." He nodded, grateful, and for a moment in his eyes she wasn't invisible. When the lights dimmed across the base, she lay back and stared at the ceiling. The whir of the fan overhead became a storm in her mind, winds carrying fragments of memory she didn't want to face. The sound of her father's voice, telling her once that silence can be louder than shouting. The day she stood at his grave, words choking in her throat, never spoken. And the vow she whispered to herself that night, to carry what he could not, to serve where he once stood. But she had learned the hard way: silence is not always heard. The dawn came cold and colorless. Boots marched against concrete. The air smelled of fuel and iron. Engines roared, drowning out thought. She checked her gear one last time, movement swift, practiced. Her rifle slung across her shoulder, weight familiar. Her helmet clipped beneath her arm. She walked toward the waiting vehicle, every step steady, deliberate. But inside, a question lingered, a sharp whisper in the back of her mind. Was this the moment? Should she speak again, stop them, force them to listen? The words pressed against her lips, and then she swallowed them. Not yet. She climbed in. The metal bench was cold against her legs. Soldiers filled the seats beside her, their voices a low murmur of forced confidence. She caught fragments of stories. One man talking about his daughter's birthday next week, another about a fishing trip he swore he'd take when he got back. These men, their lives stretched far beyond this steel cage. She listened, and the weight of what she knew pressed harder against her chest. The convoy rolled out. Gravel crunched beneath tires. Dust rose and clung to the air like smoke. She kept her gaze forward, scanning the horizon, the ridges, the sky. Every shadow meant something. Every silence was too loud. No one else saw it, not yet. The valley opened before them, wide and endless, the morning sun spilling gold across stone. It looked calm, peaceful, and that was the problem. She felt the shift in her stomach first, a stillness, a warning. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing, scanning the ridge. There, barely a flicker, a glint of glass almost invisible against rock. Her breath caught. Her heart slammed once hard. She knew. But by the time she opened her mouth, by the time her voice finally rose above the roar of the engines, it was already too late. The explosion ripped through the morning. Sound vanished. For a heartbeat, there was only light, fire, a shockwave tearing air apart. Her body slammed against steel, her ears ringing with silence that wasn't silence at all. She tasted dust, blood, the sharp tang of iron in the back of her throat. Screams cut through the haze, distant and muffled like echoes underwater. She forced her eyes open. Smoke poured in. Flames licked at twisted metal. The soldier beside her lay crumpled, unmoving, his helmet rolling across the floor. Diaz was on the ground, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle, his face pale with shock. She crawled toward him, every muscle burning. Her voice finally broke through, raw and fierce. Stay with me, Diaz." His eyes locked on hers, wild, terrified. He tried to speak, but the words were swallowed by the roar around them. She pulled him close, shielding him from falling debris. Her chest heaved, lungs filling with smoke. Around her, chaos tore the valley apart. And in that chaos, one thought carved itself into her mind, deeper than the fire, deeper than the pain. She had been right. And no one had listened. Smoke clawed at her throat, thick and suffocating. She pulled Diaz tighter against her chest, feeling the tremor in his body, the desperate struggle of his breath. Around them, the valley was no longer quiet. It roared with chaos, gunfire cracking from the ridges, shouting voices, engines burning out in twisted heaps of steel. She tried to orient herself, but the world was tilted, disoriented, spinning in fragments. The convoy was gone. At least half the vehicles lay in flames, black smoke twisting skyward like a warning flare. The rest were scattered, soldiers scrambling for cover, some firing wildly into rocks they couldn't see through. Her ears still rang, a hollow silence wrapped around every sound. But the details broke through anyway. The sharp ping of bullets striking metal, the high-pitched whine of ricochets, the dry thud of boots hitting dirt. She dragged Diaz behind what was left of the vehicle's shell, pressing his body against the charred steel. His face was pale, sweat mixing with blood at his temple. His lips moved, soundless, a question forming in silence. She shook her head, gripping his shoulder. "Don't talk, just breathe." Her voice was steady, though inside she was cracking open. A figure stumbled past, Sergeant O'Malley clutching his rifle, one arm bleeding through shredded fabric. He crouched beside her, eyes wide, frantic. Ambush, goddamn ambush. They were waiting for us. How the hell? He stopped mid-sentence, catching her eyes, the recognition dawning like a knife in his gut. She didn't need to say it, he knew. She had warned them. For a flicker, shame crossed his face, but there was no time for apologies. He pulled his weapon up, firing into the ridge. "We're pinned," he shouted, though his voice cracked on the word. Pinned, trapped, exposed exactly where she had told them they'd be. She adjusted Diaz's position, shielding him as best she could, then raised her own rifle. The weight of it steadied her. Through the scope, the world sharpened. Smoke thinned, edges became clear, the jagged ridge, the flashes of movement, the enemy hidden in stone. Her breath slowed. The ringing in her ears dulled. She found one target, then another. Two sharp pulls of the trigger, clean and precise. The battlefield didn't quiet, but in her scope, two threats vanished. It wasn't victory, it was survival. O'Malley glanced at her, face lined with desperation. "We have to move." She nodded once, eyes still fixed down the scope. Movement to the left, three silhouettes advancing through cover. She marked them, waited, fired, two dropped. The third stumbled back into shadow. Her heart pounded steady now, not frantic but deliberate. Diaz groaned beneath her arm. His voice broke through, faint, trembling. Am I dying?" The question pierced deeper than any bullet. She looked down, her jaw tight. His arm was mangled, yes, but it wasn't just that. Shrapnel had torn across his side, blood seeping fast, too fast. She pressed her hand against the wound, heat flooding through her glove. "No," she whispered firmly, bending close to his ear. "Not today, you're staying with me. Do you hear me? You stay." His eyes fluttered, wet with pain, but he held her gaze. And for a moment that was enough. A call rang out through the smoke, Captain Rhodes, his voice raw, barking orders. "Fall back, regroup at the southern ridge, move." But the southern ridge was a graveyard, she knew it. She had seen the signs, the way the ground funneled soldiers into a perfect kill zone. If they ran that way, half of them wouldn't make it. Maybe none. Her chest clenched. She thought of standing in that briefing room, words dissolving into silence. She could shout now, scream, but would they listen here in the storm of gunfire and panic? She looked at Diaz again, his blood soaking into her sleeve. She thought of the photograph folded in her pocket, the promise, the vow, and something inside her hardened. She would not stay silent again. Her voice tore through the chaos, sharper than the rifles, stronger than the explosions. "Not the ridge, it's a trap. Use the riverbed." For a split second no one reacted. The battle swallowed her words. Then Rhodes turned, eyes wide, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. The pause hung heavy, life and death balanced on disbelief. O'Malley broke it. "She's right," he shouted, his own voice echoing hers. "The ridge is suicide, riverbed now." It shifted everything. Soldiers hesitated, then began moving, crawling, dragging each other toward the dry cut of the riverbed that sliced through the valley floor. Gunfire followed, but the angle was different there, less exposed, less certain. Cover, a chance. She exhaled, a tremor she hadn't noticed escaping her chest. For once, they had listened. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. She pulled Diaz up, slinging his good arm over her shoulder. He gasped in pain, but she didn't let go. Step by step, she dragged him from the wreckage, bullets snapping past her head, dirt exploding at her feet. O'Malley covered their flank, firing short bursts, shouting curses with every shot. The riverbed loomed ahead, cracked earth, deep enough to shield them. Soldiers were already sliding into it, some carrying the wounded, some stumbling half-conscious. She slid down with Diaz, the dry soil collapsing beneath their boots. For the first time since the explosion, there was something close to safety. Not safety itself, but the possibility of it. Diaz collapsed against the ground, his chest heaving. She pressed her hand harder against his wound, her mind racing. He needed a medic. He needed evacuation. but their radios crackled useless static. The blast had shredded communication lines. They were cut off. She pressed her forehead briefly against her glove, the heat of his blood searing through. She whispered to herself, words only she could hear. "Hold on, just hold on." Around her, the riverbed filled with bodies, living, breathing, wounded, fighting. Rhodes slid in, helmet cracked, eyes fierce. His gaze locked on her again, and this time he didn't look away. He didn't dismiss her. "You saw it," he said, panting. "You knew." Her throat tightened, but she didn't answer. The truth was heavy, bitter. His jaw clenched, regret flickering through the dirt and blood on his face. Then he looked away, issuing orders, pulling his men together. The firefight raged above them, but here, in this carved-out slice of earth, a fragile line had been drawn. Survival or death would balance on it. She kept her hands steady on Diaz, though her own body trembled. Every second dragged like an hour, every heartbeat loud in her ears. She thought of the silence at the briefing, the weight of her unsaid words, and she wondered, if she had shouted then, would they be here now? Would Diaz be bleeding into her hands? Would the valley be filled with smoke and fire? Her chest ached with the question, but there was no answer. Not yet. The battle pressed on, relentless. Shadows moved across the ridges. Explosions rattled the ground. The air was thick with dust, sweat, and the metallic sting of blood. And in the midst of it, she held on to Diaz, her rifle within reach, her body anchored between duty and despair. She closed her eyes for a moment, blocking out the chaos, listening instead to the faintest sound, the rasp of Diaz's breath. Fragile, human, proof that he was still here, proof that her silence hadn't cost him everything. Not yet. But deep inside, beneath the dirt, beneath the fear, one thought pulsed steady and unrelenting. This wasn't over. The ambush was only the beginning. And somewhere out there, hidden in the ridges, was the reason why. What happens when the gunfire stops? Not because the enemy is gone, but because they're waiting. The silence that fell over the riverbed wasn't peace. It was a predator circling, hidden in the rocks. Every soldier felt it, the way they crouched lower, weapons trembling in their hands, eyes darting at shadows that didn't move. She stayed still, one hand pressed firmly on Diaz's wound, the other gripping her rifle. Her body was aching, lungs tight from smoke, but she forced herself into stillness. Any movement felt like it could draw fire. Diaz stirred beneath her, his lips cracked as he whispered, voice weak, "It's too quiet." She glanced at him, her throat tightening. His face was pale, almost gray, but his eyes clung to hers, searching for reassurance. She gave him none. She couldn't, not this time. "Save your strength," she said softly, though every word scraped her chest. A few meters down, Rhodes knelt with O'Malley and two others, maps spread across the dirt. Their voices were hushed, tense. She caught fragments, low on ammo pinned from both ridges, no air support. Their words carried weight, each one heavier than the last. O'Malley slammed his fist against the ground. "We walked right into it. They knew every move we'd make." His voice cracked, not just from anger but guilt, like they were inside the briefing room with us. Her eyes flicked toward him at that. Inside the briefing room. The phrase echoed. Her chest tightened, not with fear but recognition. She had felt it, she had known, but saying it aloud would make it real, too real. Betrayal wasn't a theory. It was a knife in the dark, and if she named it now, there would be no turning back. Above them, a stone clattered. Every rifle lifted in unison, barrels snapping toward the ridge. Fingers tensed on triggers, breaths held, but nothing followed, just silence. The kind that pressed against eardrums until it hurt. She closed her eyes, inhaled through her nose, and let the air burn through her lungs. Her father's words came back unbidden. Sometimes the quiet is the loudest warning. She opened her eyes, scanned the ridge again, and then she saw it, a shimmer barely there, like heat bending the air, a scope's glint, watching, waiting. Her stomach knotted. They weren't firing because they didn't need to. They had them where they wanted them. Every soldier in the riverbed was a trapped animal bleeding time until the kill. She had to move. Her hand tightened on Diaz's shoulder. "I'll be back." His eyes widened, panic slicing through his pain. "No, don't." But she was already sliding away, low and fast, her body pressed to the dirt. The others barely noticed, too caught in their own terror. She moved along the bend of the riverbed, rifle against her chest, scanning every shadow, every stone. Her pulse pounded steady, like a drum keeping her alive. At the bend, she found what she needed: an angle. The ridge wasn't a wall, it had fractures, openings. If she could climb high enough, she could see, she could confirm. Her fingers dug into the dirt, boots pressing against stone, body straining upward. Every scrape echoed in her mind like thunder, but she climbed anyway, teeth clenched against the pain in her ribs. Inch by inch, she rose. When she reached the ledge, she flattened, her chest heaving, dust coating her tongue. She brought the scope to her eye. And there it was. Half a dozen figures stretched across the ridge, their rifles trained downward. Calm, patient, coordinated. She saw their lips move in silence, hands signaling, and then something worse. One of them wasn't wearing what the others wore. His uniform was different, familiar. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't possible. But the insignia was there, clear through the scope. Not theirs, not local, not insurgent. It was friendly. It was theirs. Her chest clenched so tightly she thought her ribs might snap. She pulled back from the scope, shut her eyes, and let the truth tear through her. This wasn't just an ambush. It was betrayal. The question stabbed at her: who had sold them out? She slid back down the ridge, her boots slipping on loose stone, heart hammering faster now. When she reached the riverbed, Rhodes caught sight of her, eyes narrowing. "Where the hell did you go?" She ignored his tone, kneeling quickly beside Diaz to check his pulse, his breath, still there. Barely. She looked up, locking eyes with Rhodes. Her voice was low, sharp. "They're not who you think they are." He frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Someone fed them our plan, someone on our side." The words landed like shrapnel. O'Malley froze mid-reload, his jaw slack. The others glanced at one another, disbelief flashing in their eyes. Rhodes shook his head almost violently. "That's not possible." Her gaze didn't waver. "It is. I saw it on the ridge." Silence, heavy, suffocating. O'Malley spat into the dirt, rage flaring across his face. "Goddamn traitor, one of ours." His voice broke, softer now. "How many of us have to die before we stop pretending this isn't happening?" Rhodes looked away, his chest heaving. The denial was there, but so was the doubt. She could see it eating at him. Another soldier stumbled into the riverbed, dragging a wounded comrade. Blood smeared his hands, his face streaked with dirt. His voice was hoarse, desperate. "We can't stay here. They're closing in." Rhodes looked at her again, and for the first time there was no dismissal in his eyes, only fear and need. "What do you suggest?" he asked. The question was a knife, cutting both ways. She had fought for years to be heard, and now, when the moment finally came, the weight of it crushed her. If she was wrong, if she led them astray, more would die. But if she stayed silent, they were already dead. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. Her voice was steady, though her insides trembled. "We move north, through the ravine. It'll take us out of their line of sight. It's longer, riskier, but it's the only way." Rhodes studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. The decision shifted the air. Soldiers stirred, eyes turning to her, not with dismissal this time, but with fragile trust. It pressed on her shoulders, heavy as stone. She adjusted Diaz's position again, whispering to him, "We're getting you out. Hold on." His lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile. "I trust you," he whispered, and then his eyes fluttered closed. Her chest tightened, a pain sharper than any wound. They moved, slow, deliberate, dragging the wounded, covering each other in fragile rotations. Every sound echoed, every step felt stolen. The ravine loomed ahead, a jagged scar in the earth. As they slipped into its shadow, she glanced back once at the ridge. The figures were still there, still watching. And she knew this wasn't the end. The betrayal was bigger than this ambush, bigger than this valley. And the silence she had carried all this time, it was about to cost more than she had ever imagined. What does it feel like to move through shadows, knowing every step could be the last? The ravine swallowed them whole, narrow walls of stone rising on either side, the air cooler but thick with tension. Every boot that struck dirt seemed too loud. Every breath sounded like a beacon. They moved in a line, broken and staggering, dragging the wounded, weapons ready but uncertain. She kept Diaz close, his arms slung across her shoulders, his weight pressing her spine into the earth. He drifted in and out, breath shallow, skin clammy. Each time his head slumped forward, her heart clenched in panic. She whispered his name, forcing him back to her. "Stay with me. Don't close your eyes." Sometimes he answered, sometimes he didn't. O'Malley moved ahead, rifle raised, eyes darting at the jagged cracks above them. His voice carried back, low but urgent. "They're tracking us. I can feel it." He wasn't wrong. She felt it too, that predator silence, the one that didn't mean safety but calculation. Somewhere above, eyes followed them. Rifles marked them. Patience pressed down like weight. Rhodes brought up the rear, his face hard, jaw tight enough to break teeth. Every so often his gaze flicked to her, not with doubt now, but with something heavier. Expectation. Responsibility. Her chest tightened with every glance. This wasn't what she wanted, to be the voice they relied on only after everything had burned. But the moment had found her, whether she was ready or not. The ravine narrowed, forcing them into single file. Rocks jutted out, scraping at their gear, tearing fabric, slowing every movement. The wounded groaned, muffled by hands over their mouths. The air stank of blood and fear. Then without warning, the sound came. A crack not from their side but above, a rifle. A bullet slammed into stone, splintering dust across their faces, then another, and another. "Down!" Rhodes roared, his voice echoing. They dropped, bodies pressed into dirt, dragging the wounded into shallow cover. Gunfire poured down, ricocheting against stone, sparks flaring in the dim light. Shouts rose, panic thick. She pulled Diaz against the wall, shielding him with her body. Her scope snapped upward, searching. Movement flashed across the ridge, silhouettes darting, disciplined, not frantic. These weren't raiders. These were trained, coordinated. Her teeth clenched. Whoever betrayed them hadn't handed them to amateurs. She squeezed the trigger once, twice. 2 silhouettes fell, tumbling out of sight, but more remained, too many. Rhodes shouted over the storm, "We can't stay pinned, move." But moving meant exposing themselves, and yet staying meant death. Her mind raced, mapping the terrain in fragments. The ravine twisted ahead. She remembered the map, remembered the slope leading out just a kilometer north. If they could reach it, they'd break line of sight. She shouted, voice sharp, "On me, keep low, cover fire." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then O'Malley nodded, teeth bared in a grimace. "You heard her, move." Gunfire erupted, their rifles blazing upward, not to kill but to blind, to force heads down. She dragged Diaz with everything she had, legs burning, lungs on fire. The others followed, carrying, crawling, stumbling. Bullets rained down, chipping stone, slicing air. One man screamed, clutching his thigh, dragged by another. The air reeked of cordite and dust, ears splitting with the echo. But the ravine twisted, bent, carried them forward, and suddenly the fire thinned. The walls rose higher, blocking angles. Shadows deepened. Silence returned. They collapsed into the dirt, chests heaving, bodies trembling. For a moment no one spoke, just breathing, just survival. She laid Diaz gently against the wall, pressing her hand to his side again. The blood hadn't slowed. Her vision blurred for a second, panic threatening to consume her. She forced it down, steadying her breath. She couldn't lose him. Not here. Not like this. O'Malley staggered over, sweat and dirt streaking his face. He crouched low, voice breaking. "We're not gonna make it, are we?" She looked at him, at the tremor in his hands, the fear he tried to bury beneath anger. And she felt it too. That gnawing certainty that maybe they were already ghosts, still walking only because death hadn't finished its work. But she couldn't say that. She had to be what Diaz needed, what all of them needed. She swallowed the truth and gave him something else. "We keep moving. As long as we move, we're still alive." His eyes flickered, uncertain, but he nodded, and that was enough. Rhodes approached, crouching beside her. His voice was low, urgent. "If you're right about betrayal, Command won't be sending anyone. We're on our own." She met his eyes. For once he didn't look through her. For once he saw her, and the weight of it pressed down harder than being ignored ever had. She whispered, "Then we survive anyway." He nodded slowly, then stood, addressing the others. "We push through the ravine. One click north, there's an incline. We take it, we regroup, we figure our next step." The soldiers listened, not just because he ordered it, but because the unspoken truth hung in the air. Her voice had been right so far. They rose again, battered shadows against stone, and moved. The ravine twisted endlessly, the walls tightening, the air cooler. Birds scattered above, startled into flight. Their wings beat like thunder in the silence. Every sound made them flinch. Every silence made them wonder if it was over. At one bend, they passed a trickle of water seeping from the rock. Men dropped to it, desperate, cupping it with shaking hands. She wanted to drink to drown her own thirst, but Diaz came first. She soaked a rag, pressing it against his lips. He stirred, weakly drinking. For a moment, she saw gratitude in his eyes, and it cut her deeper than any wound. Because she knew, gratitude like that often came from those who wouldn't last. She forced the thought away, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "You're going home," she whispered. "You hear me? You're going home." He didn't answer, but his chest still rose and fell. That was enough. As they moved again, the incline finally appeared, a slope etched into stone, climbing toward a pale strip of sky. Hope flickered, fragile but real. Then the sound came again. Not gunfire this time. A low thrum, mechanical, growing louder. They froze, eyes lifting skyward. And then they saw it, rotor blades slicing the air, a helicopter cresting the ridge. For a heartbeat, relief swept through them. Extraction. Rescue. But she felt it before she saw it, the insignia. Wrong, foreign, not theirs. Her stomach dropped. The betrayal wasn't theory anymore. It was flying above them, blades tearing the sky, guns mounted on its sides. And as it hovered, lowering, its shadow swallowing the ravine, one thought tore through her. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about who had sent that bird. The thrum of rotor blades filled the ravine, echoing off stone like a monstrous heartbeat. Dust and grit swirled, whipping into their eyes, stinging raw throats already torn by exhaustion. The helicopter hovered above them, its shadow stretching long and dark across broken earth. For one heartbeat, some of the men stared upward with relief etched across their faces, ready to believe salvation had come. Rescue, reinforcements, a way out. But then she saw the insignia. Wrong colors, wrong pattern, not their bird, not their command. Her gut turned to stone. "Down," she screamed. Gunfire erupted from the chopper's mounted side guns, a rain of lead tearing into stone. Shards exploded, rattling across helmets. Men dropped flat, scrambling for cover in the jagged earth. The hope of rescue shattered into chaos. O'Malley cursed, returning fire upward, bullets sparking against the helicopter's belly. Rhodes bellowed orders, pulling men against the wall of the ravine. But the bird adjusted, hovering lower, herding them like prey. The betrayal wasn't distant anymore. It wasn't whispers or suspicions. It was steel, bullets, and rotors hovering above their heads. Her rifle snapped up, scope catching the gunner's silhouette. She squeezed the trigger, recoil biting her shoulder. The gunner slumped, blood misting in the rotor wash. For a second, the barrage faltered. "Move," she yelled, dragging Diaz with her, her voice a whip cutting through the chaos. They scrambled toward the incline, rocks crumbling beneath boots, dust choking every gasp. Rhodes grabbed another soldier by the collar, hauling him upward. O'Malley fired until his magazine clicked empty, then reloaded with shaking hands. The helicopter banked, circling, lining them up again. Its shadow swept across them like a predator's wing. "Cover!" Rhodes roared. They dove against the slope as the chopper opened fire, bullets chewing stone, tearing earth. One man screamed, then fell silent, his body sliding back down into the dust. Another cried out, clutching his shoulder, blood painting his sleeve. But they climbed, inch by inch, hands clawing at rock, boots slipping, grit under nails. Every second death hissed above them, but still they climbed. She heaved Diaz up, his weight unbearable, but her arms didn't falter. She couldn't. Not now. His breath rasped against her ear, shallow, fatting. She forced strength from emptiness, from anger, from the refusal to let betrayal claim him too. At last they crested the slope, spilling onto open ground. The world above stretched wide, barren hills rolling beneath a burning sky. But the helicopter rose after them, circling like a vulture, blades chopping the air. They scattered into what little cover the terrain offered, boulders, shallow dips, nothing solid enough. Gunfire raked the earth, throwing dust clouds skyward. Rhodes pressed his back to stone, shouting over the roar, "We can't outrun that thing." She wiped blood from her cheek, eyes burning. "Then we don't run." The words fell heavy, anchoring the team. O'Malley looked at her like she'd lost her mind, but then saw the fire in her eyes. Rhodes, too, froze, then something shifted in his face. Respect. Reluctant but undeniable. The helicopter banked again, preparing another pass. She shouted, pointing, "Focus fire on the cockpit, blind the pilot." As one, rifles rose. Bullets tore through the air, streaking toward the bird's glass. Cracks webbed across it, the helicopter jerking as the pilot flinched. It veered, gunfire spraying wild. "Keep it up," she roared. They fired again and again. Glass shattered, fragments raining down. The chopper spun, wobbling, smoke belched from its side. Then, with a scream of tortured metal, it slammed into the far hillside, rotors disintegrating in a storm of shards. Fire blossomed, black smoke curling skyward. The ground trembled with the impact. For a moment, silence reigned, just the crackle of flames, the hiss of cooling metal. And then the cries began. Not from their side, from the wreckage. Voices ragged, wounded, foreign, survivors. The soldiers looked to one another, confusion and fear etched into every face. O'Malley spat. "What the hell do we do now? Finish them." Rhodes' jaw clenched, his eyes on the smoke. "They'll call in more if we leave them alive." But she stepped forward, chest heaving, eyes hard. "We take one alive." Every head snapped toward her. The idea hung in the air like a loaded gun. "Information," she said, voice steel. "We find out who sent them, who sold us out." The silence cracked under the weight of it. Even Rhodes didn't argue. Together they approached the wreck. Heat blasted their faces, the smell of burning fuel choking them. Amid the twisted ruin, 3 bodies lay still, consumed by fire. But one, broken, bleeding, pinned under wreckage, still clung to life. A foreign uniform, not theirs, eyes full of pain and defiance. She crouched, weapon raised, heart pounding. "Who sent you?" The man coughed blood, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You were never meant to leave this place." Her skin went cold. "Who?" His eyes flickered, mockery, hatred, but also fear. "Your own." Before she could press further, his head slumped, life spilling out into the dirt. The words echoed in her skull, burning hotter than the wreckage around them. "Your own." Her chest tightened. Not enemy, not strangers. Their betrayal came from inside. O'Malley cursed under his breath, kicking at the dirt. Damn it all." Rhodes stared at her, expression unreadable. But behind his eyes she saw the same thought gnawing. No one could be trusted. They dragged themselves back from the wreck, silent shadows against the smoke. Every step forward felt heavier now. Not just survival, not just escape, but the knowledge that home, the very place they bled for, had turned its back. That truth cut deeper than bullets. As night fell, they found shallow cover beneath a ridge, too exhausted to go farther. The wounded moaned in restless sleep, bandages soaked through. Fires flickered in the distance, the wreckage still burning, a beacon to whoever searched. She sat apart, Diaz's head resting on her lap, her rifle across her knees. His breathing rattled, fragile. Her hands shook, not from cold but from rage she couldn't contain. Rhodes approached, settling beside her. For a long while he said nothing. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the wind. Finally his voice came, low and raw. "You were right." She didn't answer, couldn't. He stared at the horizon, his silhouette sharp against the fading light. "If it's true, if this came from inside, then we've been fighting the wrong war." Her eyes stung, throat tight. She whispered almost to herself, "Then what the hell are we fighting for?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, heavier than any order. And as the night deepened, the fire on the hillside still burning like a scar in the distance, one truth settled into her bones. Survival was no longer enough. They needed answers. And she would burn the world to find them. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire? The night stretched long, smothering, broken only by the ragged coughs of the wounded and the restless shifting of men too tired to sleep. They had survived ambushes, bullets, even a helicopter falling from the sky. But now, lying in the shadow of betrayal, survival itself felt poisoned. She kept her rifle across her chest, eyes never leaving the horizon. Every sound pricked her nerves, the crunch of gravel beneath a boot, the distant howl of wind through stone, the faint hiss of the fire still burning where the helicopter fell. Diaz stirred against her lap, fever hot, his lips moving in a whisper she couldn't catch. She brushed damp hair from his forehead, the gesture instinctive, tender. Once she might have told herself she did it only out of duty. Now she knew better. It was humanity, fragile, dangerous humanity in a place that had none. Behind her the others murmured. O'Malley Rhodes, two others, quiet voices, too quiet. She closed her eyes and listened. "I'm telling you it doesn't add up," O'Malley hissed. "That chopper wasn't enemy, not fully. Gear was ours mixed with theirs. You saw it too." Rhodes' voice was gravel, low and sharp. "Keep your damn voice down." Why, you think she didn't notice? She was the first to call it out. A pause, the sound of someone shifting, boots scuffing dirt. Then O'Malley again, harsher now. "How do we know she isn't part of it?" The words froze her veins. Rhodes growled, but there was hesitation buried in it. "Watch yourself." "I'm serious, Captain." She knew too much, always 2 steps ahead, always quiet, holding something back. And now we're hunted, betrayed by our own. You don't find that strange? Her heart hammered. She forced her breath steady, her face unreadable as Diaz murmured softly in fever. Rhodes didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was weighted, strained. "She saved your life more than once. You'd be dead 3 times over if not for her." "That doesn't mean—" "Enough." The word cracked like a whip. Silence followed, thick, uneasy. But silence didn't erase suspicion. She sat there motionless, staring into the dark. Each breath scraped like sandpaper. Betrayal had already torn them from the inside once. Would it do so again, here, among the very people who still bled beside her? The answer came with the dawn. Gray light seeped across the horizon, painting the rocks with shadows long and thin. The men moved stiffly, faces hollow, eyes rimmed red. They gathered what little rations remained, divided water into grudging sips. Every movement was brittle, every glance sharp with mistrust. Diaz woke briefly, his eyes glassy, words slurred. "Home." She swallowed hard, forcing a smile he couldn't see. "Soon." But inside, the word cut her. Home was no longer a promise. It was the source of the knife in their backs. As they prepared to move, O'Malley shouldered his pack, muttering curses. His eyes flicked toward her and didn't look away fast enough. She saw it there, naked in his gaze, doubt, fear. They marched anyway, across stone, through gullies carved by ancient rivers, over ridges that tore breath from lungs. The sun climbed high, blistering, relentless. Sweat-soaked uniforms, salt-stinging raw skin. No one spoke, not for hours, until finally O'Malley broke. "This is suicide," he spat, wiping sweat with a trembling hand. "We're walking blind, cut off, hunted by ghosts we can't even name. And for what? For who?" His eyes snapped to her, venom sharp. "Maybe she knows." The words stopped the group cold. Rhodes' head turned slowly, warning in his gaze. "O'Malley." "No," O'Malley snarled, his voice cracking with desperation. "We've all been thinking it. She's too calm, too damn ready. Every time something goes wrong, she's already got the answer. You tell me that's normal." The others shifted uneasily, eyes darting between them. No one spoke, but silence wasn't neutral. Silence was permission. She met O'Malley's glare, her voice steady despite the rage clawing inside her. "You think I wanted this? You think I asked for betrayal, for bullets in our backs? If I knew more, if I could stop this, don't you think I would have already?" O'Malley barked a laugh, brittle, humorless. "Easy words, but words don't mean much, do they? Not when every damn thing we've bled for turns out to be a lie." Her throat tightened. For a moment she almost told him everything. The letter folded inside her jacket, the secret burning a hole in her chest since the day they deployed. But she didn't, couldn't. Not yet. Rhodes stepped between them, voice hard. "Enough, she's with us. You want to waste energy tearing each other apart? Fine, do it after we're safe. Until then, we survive together, understood?" The silence that followed was fragile, but it held. Barely. They moved on. Hours passed, terrain shifting from jagged stone to sparse scrub. The heat pressed down, relentless. Dust clung to tongues, throats cracking dry. Each step was heavier than the last. The wounded stumbled, Diaz worst of all. She half carried him now, his weight dragging, but she refused to let him fall. As the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in bruised reds and golds, they found shelter beneath an overhang. The group collapsed, too drained even to argue. She eased Diaz down, checking his pulse with trembling fingers. Weak, too weak. Her chest ached with helplessness. O'Malley sat apart, cleaning his weapon with sharp, angry motions. The others avoided him, but she felt his eyes on her, burning holes through her skin. Rhodes lowered himself beside her, his voice a rough whisper. "They're breaking. We're breaking." She stared at Diaz, her voice low. "It's already broken." He said nothing, but his silence agreed. Night fell again, heavy and thick. Stars burned cold above, indifferent. The men slept in fitful shifts, nerves frayed too raw for rest. She didn't sleep, couldn't, not with O'Malley's suspicion thick in the air, not with the words of the dying enemy soldier still echoing in her head. "Your own." At some point, O'Malley stirred, muttering in restless dreams. She rose, moving a few steps away, needing distance, needing air. The desert wind bit cold now, tugging at her jacket. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the outline of the letter hidden within. The truth she carried. The truth that might damn her if spoken, yet damn them all if kept. Her father's handwriting, his last words, a warning she'd never shared, a secret she had carried into this mission like contraband. Every word she hadn't said was a clue, but no one listened, no one knew. She closed her eyes, breath shuddering. The choice gnawed at her, speak and fracture them beyond repair, stay silent and watch them tear apart anyway. Somewhere behind her, Diaz groaned in his sleep. The sound broke her. She clenched her fists, whispering into the night, "Hold on, just hold on." But even as the words left her lips, doubt twisted inside her. Was she asking it of him or of herself? And the night, cruel and silent, gave no answer. What breaks first, trust or flesh? The desert gave no time to answer. Dawn came pale and merciless, washing color from the world, leaving only bone-white rock and endless silence. The men stirred stiffly, their eyes sunken, nerves frayed. Weapons were checked with trembling hands, water rationed to drops. She sat with Diaz's head against her knee, his skin clammy, his pulse a faint flutter. He whispered again in fever, words half-formed, lost to the wind. She bent close, straining to catch them, but all she heard was a broken syllable, her name. The sound hollowed her chest. Behind her, voices cut through the stillness. O'Malley again, always O'Malley. "I'm telling you, this doesn't end with us alive," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're being led like cattle, and I don't think it's by the enemy." Her jaw tightened. Rhodes turned sharply, voice raw. "Enough, you're poisoning the air." "Am I, or am I the only one willing to say it? Look at her." His finger jabbed toward her like a weapon. "She's calm when the rest of us are breaking. She's carrying secrets. Don't tell me you can't see it." The others shifted uneasily. Eyes flicked toward her, then away. No one spoke, but silence again was permission. She rose slowly, easing Diaz down onto a folded jacket. Her rifle hung loose at her side, but her voice was steady, each word clipped, cold. "You want answers, O'Malley? Fine, but not like this. Not with your paranoia choking the men who still have a chance at surviving." His laugh was sharp, bitter. "Surviving? You think we survive this? You think we're making it home? You're lying to us just like Command lied to us, just like whoever sent that bird lied to us. And I." He didn't finish. Because the desert did. The crack of a rifle split the air, sharp and merciless. A bullet snapped past O'Malley's head, chipping stone, showering grit across his face. Another shot rang out and one of the men screamed, clutching his thigh as blood spilled hot and fast. "Ambush! Cover!" Rhodes roared. They dove for what little rock there was, scrambling, dragging the wounded with them. Dust exploded around them as rounds tore into the earth. The desert came alive with echoes, the enemy hidden, unseen, everywhere. She threw herself flat, scope to her eye, a flicker movement on the ridge. She squeezed the trigger, the rifle kicking back, and one shadow toppled, but more moved, too many. O'Malley cursed, firing wild, his rage now desperation. Rhodes shouted orders, trying to carve order from chaos. The men obeyed, but their fire was scattered, their will brittle. She kept firing, controlled, precise. One target, then another. Each kill bought seconds, only seconds. A grenade arced overhead, landing in the sand too close. Without thinking, she grabbed Diaz, dragging him behind a boulder as the blast ripped the earth apart, sand and shrapnel raining down. Her ears rang, silence roaring in place of sound. When hearing returned, it came with screams. Two more men down, blood soaking the dust. Rhodes pressed against a stone, face streaked with dirt, eyes burning. "We can't hold them here." Her mind raced, scanning terrain, counting shadows. The ridge, the high ground. That was where the fire came from. If they didn't take it, they'd be shredded. She pointed, shouting over the chaos. "We push the ridge, cut them off at the top." O'Malley's face twisted, disbelief and fury warring. "That's suicide." Her voice cut through, iron sharp. "Staying here is worse." And then she moved, sprinting low, rifle tight against her chest. Bullets tore the sand at her heels. Rocks exploded inches from her head, but she kept moving. A shadow rose ahead, rifle leveled. She fired first. The man fell, tumbling down the slope. Behind her, Rhodes shouted, ordering the men to follow. Footsteps pounded. Gunfire cracked. The ridge became a storm. She clawed her way upward, lungs burning, vision blurred by sweat. Hands raw on stone, legs shaking, but she didn't stop. Diaz's face flashed in her mind. Rhodes' words, O'Malley's accusations, and deeper still, the letter against her chest, her father's voice inked in fatting lines. At the top, another enemy appeared close, too close. He raised his rifle, eyes wide. For a heartbeat, their gazes locked. His were young, too young. She pulled the trigger anyway. The report echoed. He dropped. She stumbled past, throat tight. Then she was on the ridge, sprawled against stone, rifle raised. Below she saw them, the ambushers, shadows moving in the gullies, rifles flashing. She fired down, controlled, ruthless. One by one they fell. The others followed her lead, climbing, flanking, pouring fire into the ridge. Within minutes the desert fell quiet. The echoes faded. Only the wind remained. Bodies lay strewn across stone, blood soaking into thirsty sand. The survivors regrouped, panting hollow-eyed. The wounded groaned, bandages hastily wrapped, hands slick with blood. Rhodes slumped against a rock, chest heaving. They had survived again, barely. But survival wasn't victory, not anymore. O'Malley staggered forward, his face a mask of rage and exhaustion. He jabbed a finger at her, spittle flying. "You knew, you led us right into them." Her chest heaved, but she didn't flinch. "I let us out. If we'd stayed down there, you'd be in pieces." "You think I don't see it?" His voice cracked, high and raw. "You've been playing us since day one. You knew there'd be betrayal, you knew command was dirty. What the hell are you hiding?" Rhodes stepped in, his voice sharp. "O'Malley." "No," O'Malley shoved him back, wild-eyed. His rifle rose, aimed at her chest. "Tell me now, tell me what you're hiding, or I swear." Her breath caught, but her gaze never wavered. Slowly, with shaking hands, she reached into her jacket. The crumpled envelope emerged, its edges worn, stained with sweat. She held it up, her voice low but unflinching. "This." O'Malley's finger twitched on the trigger. The others stared, confusion etched in blood and dust. Rhodes' eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Her throat was dry. She forced the words out, each one heavy as stone. "My father's letter, his warning. He knew parts of command were compromised. He told me before we left. But if I spoke, if I said it out loud, I'd have been branded a traitor before we even boarded the plane." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. O'Malley's rifle trembled, his face contorted with disbelief. "So you let us walk into this blind?" Tears stung her eyes, unbidden, burning. "I didn't know how deep it went. I thought, God help me, I thought I could keep you alive without damning us all. But now," she looked at the bodies scattered across the sand, the smoke still rising. "Now I see I was wrong." The rifle in O'Malley's hands wavered. For a moment, it seemed he would pull the trigger. But Rhodes moved first. His hand closed around the barrel, pushing it down. His voice was steel. "Enough." O'Malley's breath came in ragged gasps. Then, with a strangled cry, he staggered back, dropping the weapon into the dirt. He turned away, fists in his hair, sobbing curses into the wind. No one spoke, not for a long time. The desert was silent again, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence of a fracture that might never heal. And as she tucked the letter back against her chest, her hands trembling, she knew the truth was no longer buried. Every word she hadn't said was now a wound. And wounds, once open, don't close easily. How do you measure the weight of silence? Not in medals, not in reports, not in names engraved on cold stone. It's measured in the space between words, in the pause before an answer, in the way a soldier looks down at their boots instead of into another's eyes. And tonight, standing at the edge of the runway with the world finally quiet, she wondered if silence was the only truth she'd ever owned. The mission was over. At least that's what they told her. The debrief had lasted hours, filled with questions she could have answered but didn't. She let them circle around the facts, let them pin red lines across maps, let them argue about politics and strategy. She said only what had to be said and left everything else inside. Because some truths, they don't belong in files. She walked away before anyone dismissed her. The hangar lights hummed overhead, pale against the black sky. Each step echoed, the sharp rhythm of her boots against steel and concrete like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. Behind her, voices carried faintly, others, still speaking, still trying to make sense of something they would never truly understand. And then nothing, only her and the night. She stopped outside where the air was cooler. The engines had gone quiet, but their heat still lingered in the air. She tilted her head back and looked at the stars. Countless points of light, steady and indifferent, looking down on wars and victories and losses that would never reach them. She thought of her father. He had taught her how to read the stars when she was little. Even when you're lost, he'd said, they don't move, they don't betray you. You just have to look up long enough to understand where you are. And yet when his war ended, he hadn't looked up. He'd buried his silence in a bottle, buried his memories in shadows. And she had promised herself, promised him, that she would not let silence destroy her, that she would use it, shape it, hold it like a weapon. But now, standing in the same darkness he once stood in, she wasn't so sure. She closed her eyes. The boy with shaking hands, she saw him again, fumbling with his gear, whispering that he wasn't ready. She had wanted to tell him that no one ever was. That courage wasn't about readiness. It was about going anyway. She had wanted to tell him, but she didn't. And now his silence lived inside her too. The medic, tired, scarred, carrying his own private war. She remembered the way his hands trembled when he tied bandages, the way he spoke of his daughter as if she were the only tether left. She had wanted to tell him that he wasn't alone, that his pain wasn't weakness, but she hadn't, and so his silence had joined hers. And the commander, his eyes fixed on the horizon, on a home he might never see. He had carried secrets heavier than his uniform, secrets that broke men from the inside out. She had wanted to ask him what haunted him, what promises he had failed to keep, but she hadn't, and his silence now echoed with her own. So many silences, too many. She opened her eyes again and stared at the stars. Maybe silence wasn't absence. Maybe it was inheritance, a chain carried from one soldier to the next, and maybe she was the last link willing to carry it without breaking. Her hand brushed the pocket of her jacket. Inside, the folded letter was still there, unopened. It had survived the mission, the firefight, the storm, paper thin yet indestructible. She had written it on the eve of departure, words meant for her father, words she had never sent, words he would never read. Her fingers lingered on it. Should she burn it, tear it, read it aloud to the wind? No, not yet. Instead, she drew a long breath and listened, to the hum of cooling engines, to the whisper of wind dragging across the tarmac, to her own pulse, steady, alive. She listened because silence wasn't empty. Silence was filled with everything unspoken. And in that moment, she realized something. The world had always mistaken her quiet for weakness. At the briefing table, on the mission, in the aftermath, they thought silence meant she had nothing to add, that her absence of words was absence of worth. But they were wrong. Her silence had been a choice. Every word she didn't say was deliberate. Every pause, every withheld truth, every secret kept inside, it was all calculation. Because words can be twisted. Words can be ignored. But silence lingers. It forces others to confront themselves. And when the truth finally broke open, when it became too big to hide, it was her silence that gave it power. She thought of the boy, the medic, the commander, of the ones who didn't come home. They lived in her now, not as voices but as silences, and she would carry them, not to her grave but to her life, because survival was its own act of defiance. She turned back toward the hangar. The lights still glowed faintly, figures moving inside like shadows across frosted glass. She could return, rejoin them, pretend to belong. But she didn't. Not anymore. Instead, she walked further into the dark, away from the hum of machines, away from the voices still trying to define what had already been lived. Each step took her closer to the edge of the runway. The night stretched out before her, vast and unbroken. She stopped at the farthest point, where the ground seemed to blur into sky. For a moment, she stood completely still. This was where soldiers always stood, between earth and sky, between duty and self, between what they carried and what they left behind. This was the line no one marked on a map, but every warrior knew. Her breath misted in the cool air. She whispered, not to anyone in particular, not even to herself, but to the silence itself. "I carried it, I kept it, that's enough." And the silence answered, not with words, not with thunder, but with stillness, a stillness so complete it felt holy. She stayed there for a long time, long enough for the stars to shift, long enough for the hangar lights to dim, long enough to feel the night settle around her like a cloak. When she finally moved, it wasn't with urgency, it was with certainty. She walked back slower this time, each step measured. She knew she would never explain the whole truth, not to her superiors, not to the reports, not even to herself. But that wasn't weakness. That was power. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't demand to be recorded. It simply acts. And she had acted. She had chosen. She had carried the silence when no one else could. As she reached the hangar doors, she paused one last time. She looked up at the sky, at the cold fire of the stars, and she felt the weight of every silence she had inherited. She let it press against her, steady, grounding. And then, quietly, she let it go. Not all of it, just enough. Enough to breathe again, enough to keep walking, enough to live. And as the doors slid open, spilling pale light across her face, she stepped inside without a word. No speeches, no explanations. Just silence, heavy, dignified, unbroken. And that silence, it would echo far longer than any sound ever could.